What about Ukraine and putting Ukraine and Russia up against each other? Who's going to be able to last the longest?
The war that Russia is waging against Ukraine is still going strong. One of the most fascinating questions, after almost a year into the conflict, is how Russia's economy has avoided a destabilizing economic crisis in the face of unprecedented economic sanctions. What effect have the sanctions had on the Russian population? With Russia being unable to freely trade, how has it been able to fund war machines? And how long can this last? Stick around till the end of the video. Let's find out. Ever since Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, over 11,000 new restrictions have been imposed on Russian people, businesses, goods, and technologies. While the sheer number of these restrictions is impressive, the sanctions from hell have so far failed to produce the hell that was anticipated. Throughout 2022, Russia's economy generally defied apocalyptic forecasts. In light of this, it's obvious Russia's economy is not only being affected by the war, but it's also been slammed by numerous sanctions. Speaking about the sanctions put in place by the Council, among the initial sanctions were the freezing of Russian assets overseas and the prohibition on exporting crucial technologies to Russia. Due to this, more than 1,200 Western businesses ceased operations in Russia. But 1 year into the war, are these sanctions working? One may say that Russians experienced a panic-inducing decline in the value of the ruble during the first week of the conflict as a result of the country's government assets being frozen in foreign banks and the majority of Russian institutions being excluded from the SWIFT global payment system. However, the Russian central bank was able to rapidly stabilize the exchange rate and return it to pre-war levels. Not just that, the rate of inflation, which peaked in April at 18%, declined to 12% by December. Even after this, some Western analysts insisted that the sanctions were seriously affecting the Russian economy. The recent events, which include the West's embargo on seaborne oil and a price cap on Russian oil sales globally, have been viewed as a major blow to the Russian economy. This is because the Russian economy relies heavily on the energy sector. Mikhail Krutikin, a Russian-born oil and gas analyst, said that the oil embargo would be exceedingly painful for Russia because it would be unable to supply them to China and India, which are oil exporters rather than importers. Since the beginning of the invasion, Russia has also lost most of its European market for its natural gas, which is the main source of gas giant Gazprom's revenue. Russia also added to the halting of its gas exports to Europe by attempting to compel European countries to pay for its gas in rubles and halting supplies to those that refuse. Unfortunately, the EU agreed to impose a price cap on both Russian and non-Russian gas at $180 per megawatt hour on the 9th of December, and the decline in the significance of the European market has caused a major setback for Russia. With that being said, is the Russian economy on the verge of collapse? Schoppel said, "It presently appears unlikely that the decrease in gas exports to Europe and oil sanctions will lead to Russia's economic collapse." Yes, the introduction of the oil embargo and price cap immediately began to make an impact on the economy. Even before these measures were implemented, Urals crude was selling at a higher than usual discount, indicating that the market was anticipating the impending restrictions. Following the implementation of the oil embargo and price limit, the price of Urals crude began to fall further, and the ruble, which is closely linked to Russian oil, began to weaken as well. Sadly, Urals crude lost nearly 30% of its value in December as its price discount to Brent crude grew to nearly 40%, while other factors such as unusually warm weather in Europe have played a part. The new energy restrictions have been effective in establishing deep discounts for Russian oil. According to some estimates, the first month of the oil embargo and price limit cost Moscow approximately $172 million per day, representing a 17% decrease in Russia's earnings from fossil fuel exports. As a result, the country's energy earnings dropped to their lowest level since August 2020, and the outcome was a rapid decline in oil and gas tax revenues in early 2023, resulting in the largest January budget deficit since the 1998 crisis. However, through 2022, this group of sanctions was generally ineffective in achieving the desired outcome, which is collapsing the Russian economy. The sanctions were offset by Russia's current account surplus from energy earnings, which have skyrocketed amid high global commodity prices and the sanctions-induced collapse of imports. The Kremlin also also imposed strict capital controls, including a prohibition on Russians transferring foreign currency overseas in amounts greater than a small fixed amount. In fact, Russian exporters were compelled to sell 80% of their foreign currency revenue for rubles, after the Russian central bank temporarily raised interest rates to 20%. As a result, Russia was able to stabilize and even strengthen the ruble. Surprisingly, the outcome of this move by the end of the spring of 2022 was that the ruble emerged as the world's best performing currency, defeating the original expectations of sanction experts. However, macroeconomic conditions in Russia are unlikely to remain advantageous in 2023. This is because energy sanctions are expected to strike a major blow as Europe imposed an embargo on maritime shipments of Russian Urals crude oil, as well as a price cap of $60 per barrel on oil sales agreed to by the G7 and Australia. This price cap has forced the mostly Western-based shipping insurers to only service Russian oil purchases below a certain price level. The European Union has also imposed a ban on Russian coal, and this was followed by a prohibition on refined Russian oil products, including jet fuel and diesel, in February 2023. However, Sergei Sasinov, a Russian-born political philosopher, pointed out that there will be no collapse if Russia's economy is managed sensibly. Mubchin also said that the sanctions are not a catastrophe for the Russian economy, and there will be no shortage of foreign currency. He further added that Russia is self-sufficient in terms of resources. The ability of the Russian economy to survive the effect of the sanction has also been attributed to Putin's team of liberal economists. These include Elvira Nabiulina, head of Russia's central bank, and German Gref, the CEO of Russia's state-controlled Sberbank. It seems as though the real question is not whether sanctions will cause the Russian economy to completely collapse, as it is unlikely that Moscow will run out of money to fight the war, but rather whether sanctions can put enough economic, social, and political pressure on the Kremlin to limit its options for waging war and push it towards a ceasefire. Because the ultimate goal of the sanction is mainly to deprive Russia of its ability to finance its war against Ukraine. Experts have said that Russia's ability to fund the war might remain basically unchanged. Several recent economic analyses have also revealed that despite Russia's large budget deficit and the other effects of Western sanctions, Moscow will likely have enough money to continue its conflict against Ukraine for at least a few years. In the words of Harvard economist Kenneth Rogoff, this is not to say that the sanctions are ineffective. Rather, it would be naive to believe that sanctions alone could end the conflict. Also, in one of the most recent forecasts from Bloomberg Economics, economist Alexander Isakov and his co-workers, based on their calculations, Moscow can comfortably sustain the war for at least 3 years if the average price of Russia's benchmark Urals crude does not decline significantly below $50 per barrel, price cap or no price cap. Alexander also mentioned that the Russian government could also raise funds by raising different taxes and duties as part of its revenue mobilization effort. Bloomberg economists are not alone in believing that Russia will have to wait years before emptying its military chest. Several well-known economists have reached similar findings. Sergei Alexashenko, a former Russian deputy finance minister, wrote in December that his analysis of Russia's budget found that Moscow will not experience major economic constraints in the near term that could force it to stop its war of aggression against Ukraine. With this in mind, it's obvious that the international community's sanctions against Russia following its unprovoked invasion of Ukraine have had a noticeable effect to date. However, the most devastating blow is yet to come. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you stay in touch with the world around us. Also, feel free to share your thoughts about this video. See you next time.